let's say a red thread through some of the projects is actually this relationship between the utopian and the real, the material culture and the storytelling. And I want to unpack that a little bit. And maybe start with you, Michelle, because you said that you are actually focusing on that aspect. Could you unpack a little bit on how these two could learn from each other, could inform each other? So this idea how the symbolic or how notions of identity or shared identity could tap into that built environment.
Well, yes, I could, but I was inspired by the story of Riek, because I thought, well, it's always the question like, what's next? What's the next step that we should take? And what strikes me is that we all have lots of ideas of how to move forward, and there is no lack of ideas or talent in this group, or if it's female or male professionals. But I think we've been distracted over the last, decades maybe. First by this notion of the market will do it. Mm-hmm. And then we were in the position that we as professionals had to sort of tempt the market. So the market always said, you have to seduce us with good ideas. Mm-hmm. And then we will we'll execute your ideas. And of course that will, to my experience, that never happened. And then we had another thing that we embraced, which was participation and small scale. And for the last 10 years, we worked on very small scale, putting lots of effort and voluntary work, and in very small, good intentional projects, but again, not able to deal with the urban urgencies that we have because of it. And now the crisis is over, and business as usual seems to pick up again. Mm-hmm. So, and what I think is missing is exactly this. I don't think you mentioned it like that, but the common good. So, what is the idea of the common good? Where do we want to go? What is actually this collective, or the Netherlands that we want to, or not us in 50 years, because, well, I'll be dead, but in that we want the Netherlands to be in 50 years, that we want our children to live in. And all these urgencies pop up so clearly, like with the climate change and landscape, or with migration, or with, all these things. Mm-hmm. And we don't, I realize now that I don't have good friends in the...
So basically...
but not in the bestuur. So there is still this separation between the politics and the professional world that is not helpful at all.
No, actually it's turning against us, it seems.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Arna, would you like to...
How do we do that?
No, not cool, yeah. As a matter of American slang, okay. Arna, maybe you would like to go on a bit on that. When it comes to the collective and the common good, where do you see, how can we as a common good make the right friends, for instance?
In different ways, but I think it's important that we get into action ourselves, that we don't wait for anyone. So I think that being on the ground, so kind of knowing what is happening in reality, but at the same time trying to be connected with decision makers and politicians is important. So to really search for that contact yourself, I think that is really important.
Yeah, because as Michelle says correctly, bottom up is great and we've done things, but we're also distracted by doing that and maybe not making the right friends or in the right places so we can have more impact.
Yes, but I think it's also important to kind of know where the weaknesses are of, for example, these decision makers or municipalities, or kind of where their needs are. Because what you see in a lot of municipalities is that they lack a vision about architecture, public space. So if you know that, you can come with examples or with things that you imagine. So go and be active. I think that's important.
Riek, that's beautiful for you. The weakness or the needs of the partner of your friend. That's an interesting notion.
Oh. Yeah, but it's
a bit more further, so not in the lights.
What also is needed is, of course, we have to make friends, but we have to pronounce a vision. And I know the politicians don't like visions. They think that are big elephants in the room. But I think what we need is a certain compass for the future. Because all what we are going to do takes a long time. So if we can convince our politicians that they must have this view, then the other things can follow. Because if they don't see that, if they don't feel that, if they don't agree on this, we all start quarreling around. So the first sentence is you said, of course, yes, but this is the gereedschap which you need.
The instruments.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question for Alessandra. In fact, you go at it from a maybe totally different angle. You introduce a material culture with a certain aesthetic, with a certain softness, a love for detail. I was wondering to what extent your, let's say, chosen optimism is a political position. In order to seduce and to come up with new narratives that are maybe from a different kind of tone.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that more than a political, it's not really like dealing maybe with the politic, but more with trying to find ways to actually bring people together. I mean, this project of the Prix de Rome, for example, it's in Amsterdam North, where like a lot of new transformations are taking place, and a lot of people with a lot of income will start living in high-rise buildings with a beautiful view on the eye, while it's a neighbor that has a completely different history, like a history of workers in the shipyard industry, like a blue collar and so on. So that's one for me. It's like seeing this kind of clash and seeing what are the plans of the city for their public spaces, which is actually where people should encounter each other or meet each other. Made me think that to avoid this kind of clash or really not knowing who your neighbor is. Let's come up as designers and as architects with a new type of models for public domain. So not only the waterfront with a very fancy cafes or the harbor with nice historical boats, but something else that can make you engage way more with also with other people, and at least create spaces that where different type of people with different culture can at least cross each other, share path. And then I had all this kind of metaphor of the water as being a place that can enhance encounter, and at least it's a place where you would help each other in danger, or you would say hi, like you always wave on water. And so yeah, I think that as a designers, we have the also we could imagine these places for encounters between humans, but also with the environment.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe one last one for Elma, if it's okay. I've always been intrigued because the question I started off with is the relationship between strategy, let's say, the ephemeral, if you like, and what actually gets built and done on the ground. And I've been impressed by, let's say, over 2 decades of practice that you have been weaving these two very tightly knit together. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what have you learned from those 2 decades when it comes to choosing your strategies either in the built environment or in this case like a projection into the future in order to enable a common or shared narrative for our future?
To start with is that this past 2 decades, we started with a vision for the area that we build up.
Yeah.
So it's funny that we always are named like the bottom-up architects. We don't feel ourselves like that. Doing it over, I think what we didn't do what went well is that we didn't really make friends. Or we made a lot of our neighbors, and they were our friends, but political, we didn't have one. And I think a lot of them, if we have done that differently, it would have been different now. And that's, I don't know how you do it, of how we...
We'll have a beer later. Riek, how do you make friends? Last, give us some clues.
What you do is you choose the best mayor there is, because you need a mayor as a friend. The rest is nonsense.
So above...
Yeah.
I think on that note, we'll go for the tea break and then have a proper conversation amongst all of us.